This is the Acer KG271U Abmiipx, a 27-inch Quad HD TN panel that's selling for around $250. It's not the Acer KG271U BMII PPX or the Acer KG271 CBMI DPX. Acer's monitor names are the worst in the entire industry. Their habit of only differentiating models by a letter salad nonsense suffix that more often than not doesn't show up on store result pages has got to stop. But here we are with the Abmiipx. I got this because at $250, I thought this Acer might be one of those below-the-radar amazing deals for a 2560 by 1440 27-inch monitor with FreeSync. But, and I hate to spoil the video right away, it's not at all. We all know by now the trade-offs of the various LCD technologies, VAs, IPS, and TN. You know TNs aren't going to compete with the others for pure image quality, but you're making that sacrifice for fast response times. Except the KG271U actually performs worse than the IPS Asus VG27AQ, and far worse than both the IPS XG270QG and TN panel LG24GM79G. I'll get into all that later, but I'll just start with my recommendation. Don't buy this monitor. It's not that the monitor is wholly bad. The physical design looks pretty okay. There's nothing garish or ostentatious. The stand only supports tilt and it's also a little wobbly, but at the mid $200 price point, you're not going to get a stand like ViewSonic's XG series. The monitor also has speakers, which may be necessary for the low-end market, a headphone jack, 2 HDMI ports, and 1 DisplayPort. There's no cable management here, and because the power connector is on the other side from the inputs, you're going to have a cable coming out of each side of the screen. It's definitely not the prettiest solution. There's also a vase mount if you want to use your own stand. This is not the backlight bleed you were expecting, but the backlight does show through small gaps in the bezel. It's not a huge bother, but it's just another reminder that we're dealing with a $250 display. So, let's start with the OSD. The KG271U ships in standard mode, and like most monitors, the Acer comes with a selection of predefined color modes like Action, Racing, and Sports, all of which are useless. Just stick with User. The settings I use for my calibration are on the screen now, and I'll put them down in the description if you need them. Another nice inclusion is the OSD frame rate counter, something that the Asus is missing. It's a nice feature to have just to verify that adaptive sync is actually working. Another alarming wrinkle for the KG271U is that, bizarrely, when you engage adaptive sync, you have no access at all to the Overdrive setting. That's a shame because Acer has totally botched the KG271U's FreeSync response times, and that's the primary reason why you shouldn't buy this monitor. But I will definitely get into that in much more detail soon. Probably more detail than you need. But let's begin, as usual, with the brightness and contrast results. As always, check out the text review on ApertureGrill.com for all the results and graphs. The KG271U has an impressive range of brightness, going from 59 nits at the low end all the way to a maximum brightness of 437 nits, which you'd be nuts to use regularly. Contrast is poor at around 700 to 1, which puts it into a tie with the $600 ViewSonic XG270QG IPS. I wasn't expecting much, but yet I'm somehow still disappointed. Gamma is acceptable, and Acer here offers 3 adjustments, 1.8, 2.2, and 2.4. I primarily view in a dark room, so I prefer to match to BT1886 with a gamma of 2.4. The KG271U is close enough here that I'm not too bothered, and the low contrast ratio of the monitor precludes great darkroom performance anyway. As I mentioned earlier, the out-of-box standard mode is not too bad for color accuracy, but grays are too yellow throughout the brightness range. My OSD tweaks bring the grayscale delta E average down from 7.5 to only 0.6. There's still a bluish push in the darkest grays, but that's common, and you'll see it in the exaggerated uniformity shots coming up. Color checker performance out of box is okay-ish, but it's improved slightly, 4.8 delta E average down to 2.8 with my OSD tweaks. This next animation shows a normalized waveform response of the KG271U at various OSD brightness settings. Acer dims the screen by adjusting the drive current of the backlight LEDs rather than using pulse width modulation, so the screen passes as flicker-free. Now we come to the screen's anti-glare coating. The macro shot in the upper right may look a little rough, but it doesn't truly show just how terrible this coating really is. I hate looking at the KG271U's screen. Let me throw up a comparison from all the screens I've tested so far, but I want to draw particular attention to the 17-inch Dell 1708 FP from 1,000 years ago. It's the same coating. Here's the same color pattern I used to test my CRT in the last video, with the camera focused behind the coating to see the pixel structure. And now, this thick, grainy coating just chews up and spits out this nonsense, destroying any pixel clarity the screen could have had. Taking a photo of the effect this has on the desktop is very hard, but here's an attempt. YouTube's compression might kill this, but it's worth a shot. It's splotchy and grainy, and it makes a QHD screen look lower resolution than it actually is. It's so bad it makes me angry. This anti-glare coating shouldn't be on any screen in 2020, even a cheap one. Okay, carrying on. The KG271U has no problem displaying smooth 256 color gradients, but this hasn't been a problem for any monitor I've tested so far. I don't want to shame someone, but a recent Reddit poster was complaining about banding on this logo. But upon closer examination, all of the banding is really in the image itself, not a problem with their monitor. Uniformity is overall quite good. On a full white screen, the corners are slightly darker than the center, but the 50% and 20% shots look fine, other than the inherent bad viewing angles of the TN panel. The 5% in black shots show the screen is cloudy throughout the center, but there are no obvious hotspots or light bleed around the edges like on the much more expensive ViewSonic XG270QG. But the 700:1 contrast is doing the panel no favors here. Viewing angles are about what you'd expect for a TN panel. As the image rotates, the screen goes yellowish and darkens dramatically, except for the black shot, which just gets brighter. I knew what I was getting into when I bought this monitor, and I'm willing to make the viewing angle trade-off as long as the pixel response times are great. But we'll get there. Input lag is fantastic. The waterfall plot I'm showing here contains 255 out of the 1,000 measurements I take of the screen changing from white to black based on a USB key press. The best I measured for the Acer is only 2.33 milliseconds, which is only 0.75 milliseconds slower than a CRT. Great result. Alright, now we've arrived at the good stuff. But the reason I'm currently showing you a bunch of blurry frogs is going to take a bit of an explanation, so please bear with me. It'll be worth it. We need to back up a bit to my review of the Asus VG27AQ. I said in that review that the default overdrive setting, which Asus calls trace-free, was too high in the mid-level refresh rates, which showed up as a moderately elevated average CAD score at 90 Hz. But based on reviews of the Asus from other outlets, the VG27AQ now has the reputation of being a total dumpster fire at low refresh rates. But that's not entirely accurate. The Asus actually performs better at 60 Hz than it does at 85 Hz, with one big caveat. To see what's going on, let's look at the chart section on ApertureGrill.com, where the lead image is CAD scores at various frequencies. Let's take a closer look. The three lines I want to draw your attention to are the yellow VG27AQ, the purple LG24GM79G, and the blue ViewSonic XG270QG. The ViewSonic is the only true G-Sync panel of the bunch, and it has a nice and consistent CAD all the way down the refresh rate range. But look at the other two. They're both 165 Hz, both FreeSync, and both have elevated CAD scores at 85 Hz. What's the deal here? The key is that at 60 Hz, both of these panels aren't refreshing at 60 Hz. They're refreshing at 120 Hz. That means they can adjust their overdrive every 8.3 milliseconds instead of having to wait a full 16.7 milliseconds. That's huge, and it's why the CAD at 60 Hz is near identical to the CAD at 120 Hz. This doubling trick also works at 70 Hz because 70 Hz times 2 is 140 Hz, which the monitor can still do. But you might have caught on that at 85 Hz, there's a problem. 85 Hz times 2 is 170 Hz, which none of these monitors can do. So at 85 Hz, the panel has to wait a full 11.8 milliseconds before it can change its drive level. To show how dramatic this changeover can be, I measured the VG27AQ 1 Hz at a time to find where it stopped doubling its frame rate. And here it is. 78 Hz versus 79 Hz. That's a strange number, but 78 times 2 is 156, which may be a firmware remnant left over from when the screen was supposed to top out at 155 Hz. Check out where the Asus drives back down on the 78 Hz slide, right at 6.4 milliseconds. 1 Hz higher, the panel can only drive back down at 12.7 milliseconds. All this extra area away from a perfect square wave transition is reflected in the higher CAD score. My average CAD graphs should actually look something like this. I'll fix this soon. So if the Asus actually does pretty well at 60 Hz, why the bad reputation? Well, if you limit the panel to 60 Hz with, say, the NVIDIA control panel, or you plug it into a console that doesn't support FreeSync, or you hook it up to one of those retro console boxes with a fixed 60 Hz refresh rate, the VG27AQ can't make use of its frequency overhead to tame the overdrive, and it indeed performs quite badly. But this isn't a review of the Asus, and we were looking at a bunch of frogs earlier. What did this tangent have to do with that? Now, knowing that limiting the frame rate of any of these adaptive sync displays hurts their ability to tune their overdrive, all of my previous Blurbuster test UFO pursuit images are a bit suspect. Back to the Asus for one last time. In my review, I showed this pursuit shot of the Blurbuster alien at 60 Hz. But to take the shot, I had to set the NVIDIA control panel to 60 Hz because testufo.com obviously runs in a browser window. This gives an unfair impression of what a PC game would look like if you're using adaptive sync. I love the TestUFO site and have been using it for years, but I needed a pursuit solution that wouldn't run in a browser so I could properly limit the frame rate while using the screen's full refresh rate range. So finally, back to the frogs. This is what I'm tentatively calling Frog Pursuit. Frog Pursuit is just a custom Unreal Engine build that scrolls my variously colored dumpy tree frogs across the screen at 1440 pixels per second. That's moderately faster than TestUFO's default, but that's done to really show off pixel behavior, while also being slow enough so that I can actually photograph it. The image also contains several grayscale and color patches that really help show any deficiencies in LCD behavior. UE4 is also adaptable enough that I can easily use console commands to limit the frame rate to whatever I need. I'll package this up for public download if you want to see how your screen looks, once I clean it up a little bit. So how does it look on the Acer KG271U? Yes, we're finally back to the actual monitor review. This video shows the screen refreshing at adaptive sync 60 Hz, and the trailing behind each frog looks quite severe. It's a bit hard to tell from the video, so we'll go back to Aperture Grill and look at the pursuit shot. On the website, you can click around to change the refresh rate, and I've also included a pursuit shot of my CRT, mostly to embarrass the LCDs. But let's hone in on this 60 Hz shot. Remember from earlier, with adaptive sync on, Acer doesn't allow us to adjust the overdrive. The black frog has a white trail, the white frog a black trail, the red frog a cyan trail, green goes to purple, purple goes to yellow, and check out the RGB traffic lights up top. At 60 Hz, the other monitors were doing great. What's happening? Well, here's a comparison of one transition for both the Acer and the Asus refreshing at 60 Hz. The Asus drives down at 120 Hz, 8.3 milliseconds, but the Acer, even in adaptive sync mode, only drives back down to the target level at 16.7 milliseconds. It's not doubling the refresh rate. So its CAD takes a huge hit. It's more than twice as bad as the VG27AQ. Sticking with 60 Hz for a bit longer, I wanted to see what effect the OSD overdrive settings could do at a fixed 60 Hz refresh rate, so I took my usual measurements, CAD, real, and first responses, but I started with Acer's extreme overdrive setting. Looking at the CAD graph first, some of the CAD scores look really good. Others look insanely bad. One in particular was so bad I thought my whole algorithm for producing these charts was broken. The transition from 191 to 223 had a CAD of 2295. My color scale only goes up to 280, so I had to verify. Oh dear. If it's not clear, the purple line is where the measurement should be. Look at how much area there is away from a perfect response. My algorithm isn't broken, Acer has just gone mad. This thing looks like a beached whale. Ridiculous. Back to our frogs, here's what this extreme overdrive looks like in motion. I don't want to dump on extreme too much because no one was realistically going to use it, but Acer shouldn't even give this as an option. The real battle for these fixed refresh rate modes is between normal and off. We've already looked at the normal shot with its color trails, but as I switch back and forth between it and off, you may be wondering why I have best selection at normal if off doesn't have those overdrive errors. Over the majority of transitions, normal performs better than off. Here's white falling to RGB 159, and it exemplifies how most of the transitions behave between these overdrive settings. Off is really in no hurry to reach 159, and so its error starts piling up. The CAD jumps from 391 all the way up to 792. Both are bad, but off is worse. Back to the pursuit shot, off just shows vaguely frog-shaped smears. Normal has that overdrive, but it performs better overall. Now we can move on to the adaptive sync frog pursuit shots. At 144 Hz, the KG271U is pretty well behaved, but as I move the refresh rate down, the CAD starts getting worse and worse. This means that, so far, the Acer is only doing one thing kind of well, a fixed 144 Hz refresh rate. And as I'll show you shortly, even at 144 Hz, it's barely doing any better than an IPS screen. I've been talking a lot about CAD rather than response times, but if you'd like to see all the measurements for each refresh rate, check out the RT graphs on aperturegrill.com. They're, in general, not good news for the Acer. But I want to briefly go over why my response time measurements may seem higher than what other sites report. Here's a transition where the KG271U actually physically can't overdrive, a dark gray to full white. There's no headroom above white. If you find this transition in my charts, I have a real response time of 13.0 milliseconds, and that shows how long the screen takes to get from here to here. Other sites may use the time it takes to go from 10% to 90%, which I have marked in blue and yellow. 10% hits at 0.67 milliseconds, 90% at 5.43 milliseconds, giving a 10 to 90 transition time of only 4.76 milliseconds. That's way better than my reporting of 13.0 milliseconds. But 10% to 90% is more like RGB 83 to 236 than it is 64 to 255. My real measurement is less charitable than 10 to 90. But I tend to use CAD more than response times because, and while I may be getting high off my own supply here, I think CAD bundles up both response times and response error into one nice little package. So let's go back to the charts section on Aperture Grill. But now we can pay attention to the white line representing the Acer KG271U. Reading from right to left, at high refresh rates, the Acer seems to beat the Asus VG27AQ, but it oddly loses to the G-Sync XG270QG and loses badly to the TN-LG. And as the refresh rate drops, the Acer keeps getting worse. The nicest thing to say about Acer's TN panel is that it's very slightly beating an IPS, but that's not actually true. A little further down the page, these new charts, CAD comparisons, might be the most useful to compare the screens I've tested so far. These box and whisker plots show the CAD quartiles, and I've also added points for the transition combinations I measure. Lower is better, and less spread is also better. At 144 Hz, the Acer has a slightly lower average and median than the Asus, but it has the widest IQR. The XG270QG is showing the benefits of a true G-Sync module. At 120 Hz and 100 Hz, the Acer spread keeps getting worse. And at 85 Hz, and especially at 60 Hz, the KG271U is an embarrassment for Acer. I spoiled this review in the second paragraph, but it should be clear by now why the Acer KG271U is a bad monitor. Even at $250, it's still bad. When I bought this, I thought I was getting a high refresh rate QHD gem with fast TN response times. But what I actually bought was a low effort panel dump with a terrible, and I mean terrible, anti-glare coating stuck on the front. I don't want to spend too much time recapping the review because this is already too long, but don't be tempted by the price like I was. Stretching your budget to around the $400 mark opens up options to you that are vastly superior to this Acer. So, the TLDW. Don't buy the Acer KG271U. Thanks for watching.